dear students, to the massive open online course on money and financial markets. In today's module, we are going to deal with the concept of money. The objectives of our module today are as follows. This module would deal extensively with the origin and evolution of money. We will also have a brief overview of the barter system, the disadvantages of the barter system, and as a result of that, how did the commodity money emerge, the various forms of commodity money, and its associated disadvantages. We will also have a look at the various forms of fiat money and fiduciary money in this module. So, as has already been mentioned before, we are going to start off our module with the origin and evolution of money. Money, as we know today, is the result of a long process. At the beginning, there was nothing called money. People were engaged in barter system, that is, they used to exchange goods for goods, or in other words, they used to exchange merchandise for merchandise without any concept of value equivalence. Now, let us use a very simple example to demonstrate in front of you the concept of a barter economy. Suppose there is a person who is catching more fish from the nearby river than would be necessary for himself and his group or family. He is going to keep certain fish for his own personal consumption. And of course, he would like to exchange some of the surplus fish that he has. And he would need another person. For instance, somebody who has planted rice, wheat, or corn and has harvested them, and he would like to exchange them because he would like to have his fish with some other staple food like rice, wheat, or corn. Now, when the human civilization started, this was the elementary form of trade that prevailed during that period of time. However, I should not say that barter system do not prevail nowadays. It is still prevalent among the primitive economies or primitive societies. It is also prevalent in different regions where there is difficulty in access, so that money in those regions generally are scarce. Suppose maybe it can be the case that banks in those localities are very scarce, or it is very inaccessible to people to go to banks and have money. Number 3, we talk of certain situations, special situations, where people barter items without giving any regard for their equivalence in value. A very simple example of this proposition is that of a child who does not understand the value of the toy that he has, and he wants to exchange it with his friend for maybe a very inexpensive toy. So this type of barter system, don't usually see it in real life, but this type of behavior, human behavior, is still prevalent, and this exactly corresponds to the concept of the barter economy. Now, when I talk about types of money, we find that money can take an extraordinary variety of forms. But after discussing all those forms, we will come to one main conclusion, that there are only 2 types of money. One, money that has got intrinsic value, and money that does not have any intrinsic value. So at the end of my lecture in this module, you will be able to understand that in spite of money having various diverse forms, ultimately we differentiate money into only 2 categories. One, as I've already said, money that has intrinsic value, and money that does not have intrinsic value. Coming to the next part, I deal with commodity money now. It has been found out that some commodities are more sought than others, and this is mainly because of the utility of those commodities. Once these commodities are accepted by all, they assume the role of currency. And they start circulating as an element of exchange for other products, and they are used to assess the value of other products. And slowly, these type of commodities came to be known as commodity money. When we talk about commodity money, the most important and the commonly used commodity money that comes into our mind is that of cattle. Cattle, that is mainly bovine, was one of the most commonly used commodity money. The advantages of cattle are as follows. It can move by itself, it can reproduce, it can render services, although it also had certain disadvantages like the risk of disease and death. Cattle as commodity money had also left its mark in the Latin language for their function as an exchange instrument. Even today, we keep using words such as pecunia, which is called money, and peculio, which is called accumulated money. And all these words are derived from the Latin word pecus, which means cattle. So nowadays in common parlance, we do use words like pecuniary benefit. So now we can understand that this word pecuniary basically comes from the earliest form of commodity money, which is cattle, which in the Latin language is called pecus. Another form of commonly used commodity money is that of salt. Salt was something which was difficult to obtain in the interior part of the continents. It is obvious that salt is commonly found in the coastal regions and did not pose a problem as commodity money to the coastal people. But to people who live in the interior part of the continents, obtaining salt was a major problem. And salt was also used commonly as a preservative for food. So we see that in the context of commodity money, it is not only used as money, as a medium of exchange, but it was also used for various other uses that is inherent in their nature. Now we use the word salario. What is salario? A Latin word which in English basically implies salary, compensation, normally in money terms, which is due by the employers for the service of an employee. And this word sal, that is salt, basically is originator of the word salary, because it is the payment of services that are rendered by the employer to their employees. So we see that words that are commonly used nowadays, like pecuniary, which comes from the word cattle, salary, which comes from the word salt, have all emerged from the concepts of very primitive commodity money. We can say that commodity money is money that has got its own value apart from its use as money. Another very interesting example would be that of mackerel fish. In prisons in the United States, which we call the federal prison, we find that many prisoners would like to exchange mackerel for their various other commodities they would like to use. And so mackerel in the federal prison acted as a commodity money, apart from the fact that mackerel fish was also eaten by the prisoners. So I just gave some very few examples of different types of commodity money that was in circulation not only in primitive time but also in certain present times. Later, as time passed, we found that a transition was slowly made from commodity money to money metals. Now, commodity money had certain inconvenience that was caused for commercial trade. Number one, there were changes in their values. Number two, they were indivisible. And number three, they were not durable enough. In other words, they were easily perishable. So, because of these disadvantages of commodity money, it gradually put a check on the accumulation of wealth by the individuals who possessed these type of commodity money. And as soon as man discovered metal, discovered the advantages of metal, they also discovered the fact that metals could be treasured easily. Metals were easily divisible. It was easy to transport metals. And of course, the beauty of metals. All these characteristics of metals combined it to make metal the main standard of value. And we found that afterwards, metals began to be exchanged under different forms. As we were talking about metals, the type of coins that come to our mind whenever we talk about metals are the ancient coins. In the 7th century BC, the first coins resembling the current ones appeared. They were small metal pieces, they had fixed weights and values, and they bore an official seal, that is the mark of who has minted them, which also guaranteed them their values. Gold and silver coins were minted in Greece, while small oval ingots were used in Lydia, which were generally made of a type of alloy of gold and silver combined and was called electrum. Minting of gold and silver coins were common for many centuries, and pieces were guaranteed by their intrinsic value, which means by the traded value of the metal that were used in their production. During that period of time, a coin made with 20 grams of gold would be exchanged for commodities of the same value. That is, commodities whose value resembled that of 20 grams of gold were exchanged for that coin. However, when we look at commodity money, we find that it did have certain very huge disadvantages. The most important one amongst them was that its quantity could fluctuate erratically. Let us take the example of gold. Gold was a form of money of the United States in the 19th century. However, during that period of time, gold was discovered in California, and later gold was also discovered in Alaska. And this sent the quantities of gold soaring high, which also meant that quantity of money also increased in the United States economy. We all know that once money supply increases, it leads to inflation or price rise. Some of the worst bouts of inflation experienced by the USA were set off by increases in the quantity of gold in circulation during the 19th century due to the gold discoveries in California and Alaska. However, another very important problem in this context is when the commodities that are used as commodity monies were essentially produced by human beings. In the southern part of colonial America, for example, tobacco served as money. There was a continuing problem of farmers increasing their tobacco production. By growing more and more tobacco, they knew that they could increase the supply of money. The problem of such ample supply of tobacco became so huge in these colonial American economies at that point of time that serious vigilant squads were organized. They would roam around the countryside, they would burn down the tobacco fields in an effort to keep the quantity of money supplying the economy limited so that inflation did not take place. So basically, what we see here is that these vigilant squads would roam about and would try to control the money supply by burning the tobacco fields of other farmers. The second very important disadvantage of commodity money was that they could also vary in quality. So there is always a tendency for lower quality commodities to drive higher quality commodities out of circulation. Let us take the example of horses. Horses served as commodity money in colonial New England. It was common during that period that if anybody had any sort of loan obligations, they would pay those loans in terms of number of horses. And they always had a tendency to pay back these loans using low quality horses. And they would usually keep the high quality horses for themselves or for other uses. And ultimately, the government had to pass a law forbidding the use of lame horses in the payment of debts. Because, low quality horses, people used to try to pay back their loans, giving back old horses or lame horses. So from here, a very, very important concept in the theory of money emerges, which we call the Gresham's law. I will explain the Gresham laws after a few more slides. First, I would like to explain the concept of debasing of coins. What do we essentially mean by debasing of coins? As I have already said, that coins were essentially made of precious metals. And so, a type of counterfeiting started off. That is, people started clipping off thin slice of the edge of the coin so that the value of the metal slowly started to go down. However, what happened afterwards was that the coins slowly began to have rough edges, so that people were not able to clip off their edges easily, or even if they were clipping it off, they would be noticed easily. So the idea of minting coins with rough edges started. Some rulers also started a fraudulent practice of ordering their subjects to bring coins to the mint. They would then melt down those coins and release fresh coins with new stamps on them. Between this whole process of minting the new coins, while melting them down, they would throw in some inexpensive base metals or impurities into the coin, and this led to the concept of debasing of coins, which ultimately led to huge profits for the rulers. However, this debasing of coins basically resulted again in inflation. This early experience of debasement of coins led to the observation of the law that I have already mentioned before while I was explaining about the horses, that is the Gresham's law. What does the Gresham's law state? It states that bad money generally drives out good money from the market. Now, during England, when Queen Elizabeth became the Queen of England in the mid of the 16th century, there were a lot of coins in circulation which were debased, and it was becoming very difficult for England to go for trade. So to encourage trade in the 16th century, Queen Elizabeth of England started minting new coins that contained full face value of coins in gold. But as soon as these coins came into circulation, they started disappearing. Now, my dear students, I have already explained to you Gresham's law, and I've also given you certain examples. Now, I would like to have an answer to this question. Why do you think that these new coins, which Queen Elizabeth had introduced in England during that period of time, started disappearing as soon as they were put forth into circulation? Consider you possess one new coin and one debased coin, each with the same face value. If you would have to pay a bill, you would obviously use the debased coin, as you would be parting with less gold in this way. And if you wish to obtain certain amount of gold bullion by melting gold coins, then you would use the new ones, as you would part with less face value that way. The outcome of making transaction in the above stated manner would result in the following. Debased coins would remain in circulation and the undebased coins would disappear from the market. So this was the classic example of Gresham's law. So we can conclude that Gresham's law is responsible for modern coins to be mere tokens that contain only their metallic values, which is only a minute fraction of their face values. The next milestone that we have here in the evolution of money is that of paper money. In the Middle Ages, the keeping of valuable articles with goldsmiths, that is, persons who traded in gold and silver items, was very common. The goldsmith, as a guarantee, would deliver a receipt. Whenever a depositor was required to make any large purchase, the depositor would reclaim from the goldsmith some of their deposited gold and hand it over to the seller of the goods. With time, these receipts came to be used to make payments, circulating from hand to hand, and these receipts came to be known as paper money. When it came into being this way, paper money represented a promise to pay a fixed amount of gold on demand. In this case, the promise was first made by goldsmiths and later now it is made by banks. Such paper money, which became banknotes, was backed by precious metal and was convertible on demand into this metal. Now we come back to the concept of fractionally backed paper money. Later, many goldsmiths and even banks, they realized that it was not necessary to keep a full ounce of gold in the vault for every claim of ounce that was circulating as paper money. Understanding the pattern of deposits and withdrawal of gold in a particular bank helped banks issue paper money over and above the gold that was held in their vaults. This was good business, as the money that was advanced was used to earn interest. Even today, banks have many more claims outstanding against them than they actually have in reserves to pay those claims. We say that the currency issued in such a situation is fractionally backed by the reserves. However, this fractionally backed paper money faced some problems. It was difficult to maintain the convertibility of fractionally backed paper money into the precious metal by which it was backed. So it was always prudent to maintain a reasonable relationship between the note issue and the gold reserve. Because if any economy issued too much of paper money, they would not be able to redeem its currency in gold when the demand for gold is slightly high. We come to the concept of fiat money. As time proceeded, notes issued by private banks became less common, and central banks, which are usually state-owned institutions, took control over the currency of the economy. Over time, the central banks usually have the monopoly in issuing of currency money, and also they were solely responsible for controlling the monetary conditions of the economy. In short, they were ultimately responsible for determining the value of the nation's currency. Originally, the central banks issued paper currency that was fully convertible into gold. Such a system was called the gold standard. In those days, gold would be bought by the central bank, which would issue currency in the form of gold and gold certificates, which stated that gold would always be available on demand. The gold supply thus set some upper limit on the amount of the currency issued. However, almost all countries of the world abandoned the gold standard during the period 1914 to 1928. What does this abandonment of gold standard meant? It meant that the currencies were no longer convertible into gold, and money derived its value from only its acceptability in exchange. Thus, we see that something which need not have intrinsic value also began to be served as money, and this was called fiat money, which is money that some authority, generally a government, has ordered to be accepted as a medium of exchange. The currency, like the paper notes and coins that are used in India and almost all the countries in the world today, is fiat money. It has no value other than its use as money. It is a legal tender, which means by law it must be accepted and offered either for the purpose of goods or services or to discharge debt. And ultimately, we come to the concept of fiduciary money. Fiduciary money is money that is accepted as a medium of exchange due to the trust that exists between the payer and the payee. The current monetary system that we have is highly fiduciary in nature. When a bank promises to pay its customers in different types of money, and the customer can sell or transfer the promise to someone else, it is referred to as fiduciary money. Checks and banknotes are examples of fiduciary money because they are both tokens that are used as money and have the same value. It is not declared legal tender by the government, and hence fiduciary money is not fiat money. Thus, we can conclude that money, whatever the form it has, is not valuable for itself, but for the goods and services that money can purchase. It is a sort of security, giving its bearer the faculty of being the creditor of the society and take advantage through his or her purchasing power of all the conquests that are made by the modern man. Money was not invented as a stroke of genius, but it stemmed from a need, and its evolution reflects at each time the willingness of man to harmonize its monetary instrument to the reality of its economy. Thank you.